this government is doing something at the moment very, very obvious. It's like, when people talk about you hide it in plain sight, hiding things in plain sight, because then people can't go, no, what are you talking about? Like, well, no, we've been talking about this for months. This government is overtly and actively talking about public-private partnerships or potentially privatization fully when it comes to infrastructure. Now, a story today that we're going to get to that leads into this is the conversation around schools and infrastructure in schools. Now, being fair, this is not a national problem, the infrastructure in schools. This has been kicked down the can and kicked down the can and kicked down the can. And you'll hear some of these principals say, well, the last government promised us that, and the one before them as well. The big difference here is that this government is giving tax cuts and money back to landlords over fixing up these schools. I mean, I think you've got to probably at least say the last government didn't go spending money elsewhere to not do schools. I'm not giving them a pass for not doing the schools, but it's not quite such a blatant, here, landlords, here, rich friends and donors. No, sorry, schools, we have to restart this. So that's basically what they've said. They say they're restarting, and the schools are saying you cannot hit pause, you must press on. Let's have a look at the story from tonight, and then we'll go through and I'll demonstrate to you what they're doing with getting us all ready for public-private partnerships or potentially privatisation.
Pause. That's the message from a school principal waiting on the redevelopment of her neglected facilities as the government re-looks at the cost of school building projects. 20 projects have already been paused and up to 350 could be scaled down or scrapped, with the government accused of prioritising tax cuts over classrooms. Benedict Collins reports.
Leaking roofs, run-down classrooms, even rotting buildings.
You can smell the mould, there's roof leaks everywhere, there's dampness in the walls, our floors are like waves in the ocean.
These are the conditions children with intellectual and physical disabilities face at Somerville Specialist School in Auckland.
We've got students that are very vulnerable with respiratory conditions.
They've been waiting for a rebuild for quite a while.
We're desperate. We're beyond crisis point. We've been promised a new school rebuild for more than 20 years. Successive governments have made this promise to us.
They're waiting too at Newlands Intermediate in Wellington, where they're bursting at the seams.
The school is in bad repair. The school needs some new buildings. We've got an expanding role. Currently, we're at 151% capacity.
They were hoping for a new building. Now the Ministry of Education is giving them the silent treatment.
But it was going to be...
And just remember, this is the Ministry of Education that this government's told you have to save money. You have to cut back. 6.5%, please. You got to cut back. And now part of the ministry is going, oh, yeah. So again, we cannot and we will not hold this government accountable for the condition of these buildings. That sounds like it's been a 20-year lead up to now. But we can hold this government accountable for the decisions they're making today that are going to impact these schools actually getting it fixed this term. Now, I know people are going to go, well, why not last term? That's fair. Why not the term before? That's fair. Mm-hmm. If you keep doing this, then you'll just put it on to the next term and then the next term. But I'll keep coming back to that thing. The one difference is this government, Shui, is giving tax cuts, money back to the landlords. So they're emptying the coffers and then not fixing things. That's the difference I see at Shui.
Yeah. No, this is like a special needs school. And we saw the state of it. Yeah, and Newlands, I know that area well. I could believe that. Yeah, I could well believe that they're at 150% capacity, and we know through multiple studies that classroom size heavily influences how much those kids are able to learn.
Yeah,
if they don't have funding for the building, do they have funding for the staff? How are the kids learning and that sort of thing? And then further down the track, when they're not up to the standard that's been set, I'm sure this won't be considered. Yeah, it's a failure of multiple governments. And there are some things like I get that parties can have ideological differences about stuff, but surely you can get your fucking heads together and go, hey, we are going to go on a spree of building new classroom infrastructure because we haven't done so in 50 years. And we need to do it. Are you on board? And getting that sort of those cross-party agreements that we love so much of like, yes, this is core infrastructure for the future of our country, yes, roll it. We'll support it.
Yeah, I mean, imagine the Minister for Education.
In a perfect world.
But just imagine her getting together with the spokesperson for education from the other parties and going, hey guys, whoever's going to be in government in 3 years from now, we think it's us, but whoever's going to be, we want to keep this going. So let's all sign on together to what we're going to do for these schools for the betterment of these kids. I mean, that would actually, you know what that would do? That would impress a lot of people as well and give a lot of people hope that this government, maybe they are the 6-year government. Maybe they are. If they can get together and get things done, you know, it's about outcomes, Mr. Luxon. It's about outcomes. So what are the outcomes for these broken down buildings? Yeah. All right. We'll keep going, and we've got plenty of time to talk about this though.
Just there. Right. And we were excited about it. And it was going to be something that was going to make us a school of the 21st, if not the 22nd century.
Yep, and now it's all in limbo?
All in limbo. In fact, I don't even know if I'm in limbo. I haven't been told.
Yesterday, the government announced an inquiry into school rebuilds, citing the ballooning costs. Today, pointing the finger.
I make no apologies for saying to Chris Hipkins, how did you possibly leave us in this situation?
I just don't understand why National can't take responsibility for them wanting to fund tax cuts now at the expense of kids' classrooms.
Back at Somerville School, they've just had a gutsful.
Enough is enough. This Ministry of Education and the government needs to press play on Somerville's rebuild, not pause.
Our politicians bicker, while students learn in squalor. Benedict Collins.
So there you go, Chewy. Now, that's a story in and of itself, and if anything else you want to add to that, let's do it now. But I also want to show people the danger. Well, I'll put it this way. If you're not a fan of privatisation or public-private partnerships, if you're worried that a government may give grants and money and funding to their rich mates to be, to build and to do infrastructure, then I've got some warnings for you. But before I do that, Cherry, is there anything else you want to touch on?
I've mentioned a couple of times this year that one of the things that people can do is actually reach out to these ministers and your own MPs. And maybe this is this project for this week, is telling them to get a fucking move on building workable classrooms for kids, because it's the future of the country. These guys can't bang on about educational achievement and all of that sort of thing and then give them literal black mold filled rickety shacks to learn in. Like, we take quite a bit of pride in the fact that we've got a decent education system. It's not just a failure of National. I'm sure it's a big project, and I wish that they'd stop blaming each other and just get on with it. Yeah. But maybe they need to hear from us. Maybe it's time to email Erica Stanford and say that these schools need support, and they need the politicians and the departments to sort of put the bickering aside and just roll with it. I have doubts whether that's the end game, is actually to build schools in the traditional format. But let's see. We'll carry on and see if that's what's on the tables for them.
So let's have a look at the AM show this morning. Now, this first clip is only like 12 seconds, right? And then I'll stop and explain it. It's really important for us to hear what Luxon says and remember what has been said in the past. Here's the first thing about outside groups. They're going to bring in outside groups. They're not hiding it anymore. Outside groups.
As the funding isn't in place. And so, what we're doing is having a short, sharp, surgical team come in, outside, quickly get to the problem, have an answer in May, and actually set up a way going forward so we don't have this problem dealing with this going forward. So they're not hiding it, right? Outside groups, outsides are going to come in. But what's happening, not just with Luxon, but this language is happening with others as well, is when they start talking about, maybe this government agency, maybe this department is not the best to be in charge of the infrastructure. Yeah. This is this morning. This is on breakfast. This is talking about the schools. Well, we'll have to go back to we have to go back to it and go through each of those schools and their individual cases and either rescope those projects, maybe delay some of them. But again, that's going to be our focus of as we go. As we've found this information out, we've been moving very quickly to try and get to the bottom of it. But then we've got to ask some better, longer-term questions, which is fundamentally, who actually should be running school projects and buildings? Because
who should be running school projects and buildings? Who should be doing that? Should we be getting those education experts to run the buildings, or should we get someone else?
Should be running school projects and buildings because, it is something that happens every day across New Zealand. There's always a project on the go. The question is actually, are the Ministry of Education actually the right people to do it? Or are they better to stay focused on educational policy for our kids, for example? That would be a legitimate question to be asking.
So at the moment, they're being very careful, right? They're going, we're just asking questions. We're just putting questions out there. We're just asking questions. But let me remind you of what he's just said. Like, who would be the best? This is 2 months ago, Nicola Willis talking about the ferries, okay? So her thoughts around the ferries, this is about 58 seconds, and I think we interject in this as well, Chewy, but you'll get it. Remember what Luxon's just said. Who would be the best? Maybe these guys aren't the best. Maybe there's someone better to do it. Who could that be? Oh, could that be a partnership or full privatisation?
I have confidence that we can work together to find a way forward. I do want to get others involved in solving this problem.
Just that straight away. I was going to interrupting myself. This is like Inception. But just to say again, it's the same as what Luxon just said, outside groups. I do want to get others involved. Who are we talking about here? Who are we talking about? This is the bullshit meters going up in the back of the neck a little bit.
KiwiRail, by their own admission, are not marine engineers. They're not port experts. They're not experts at building wharves. So I want to make sure we have the right people involved. I also have to acknowledge that KiwiRail aren't always going to be best placed to work out what's best for taxpayers, for ferry passengers, for freight passengers. They're going to be the best people to work out.
They're not going to be the best at figuring that out. But this consultancy, they'll probably be much better at it.
What's best for KiwiRail's passengers and freight. But we need to take a look at the bigger picture and work with all of the people involved here.
When you say you want to get other people...
So there you go. So it's the same message, right? It's the same message coming out about infrastructure. Maybe the Ministry of Education aren't the best. Maybe KiwiRail aren't the best. These are just questions we need to ask. And I'll tell you the other thing that's drawing me to this, Chewy, is what the government's doing at the moment is they're going, the sky is falling. Like, just think about the language you've heard from the leadership, Luxon, Willis, Stanford, about how terrible this is. This is terrible right now. And then the whole public, all of New Zealand goes, oh, it's terrible. But they go, but don't worry, I'll feed you baby birds. We've got this group who are going to come in and solve it all for us. And we go, oh, be still my heart, because it was so bad the sky was falling, but this group who's got nothing more than altruistic intentions are going to come along and pull us from the bootstraps up, and they're going to save us. It just made me think, Chewy, I've said this before on the show, every year that we were at university, we used to get the government, the university come along saying, there's a 30% increase in fees coming next year. That's the sky is falling, yeah? And everyone would go, what? And they'd come back after a month and go, oh, look, we've worked it out. It's only a 15% increase. And a lot of people would go, oh, phew, they solved our problem. No. They still gave you a fucking 15% increase. They just told you the sky was falling. And then the solution they brought in was more, you took it on board more easily. And that's what I see this government doing. And I really think we need to highlight it. Every time you hear them say, outside, who's the best? Not them. Got to ask these questions. We're going to look to the outside source. Are they the best for doing this? Are they the best? I find it really concerning, Chewy.
When you look overseas and you see how involved private industry is involved in supporting and providing what I would call core functions of a country.
Yeah.
We know that David Seymour loves his charter schools. Maybe they're better at doing schooling than the Ministry of Education is.
Yeah.
We can't possibly, there's no way that the Ministry of Education can approve school construction and find a construction company to do it and run it in a budget. There's just no way that they can do it. The laughable thing that KiwiRail, because there's There's rail in the name. They don't know ferries and wharfs. Yeah, but they can tender out a project. They can go to a shipping expert, as they did, to design ships that would last us decades. And as we found out, that was the big splash, right? KiwiRail had gone fucking bananas and ordered Ferraris when we can get a second-hand Corolla. Did anybody see the rest of that story that came out recently? There are, in the world, 22 ferries that would be suitable for New Zealand conditions.
Right.
Do you know how many of them are for sale?
I'd say none would be my guess.
None. They're all being used. So we've cancelled the ferries in the hopes that we can get a second-hand Corolla, and there fucking isn't one. This is the party of infrastructure, isn't it? Isn't that always the thing, that they're better at roads? They're better at big projects because of the innate ability of the businessmen that run the National Party. And it's all fucking bullshit. Ministry of Education has built schools for decades and has built school infrastructure that has lasted for decades. And it is time to renew and refresh that based on new demographics and looking into the future. National don't do long-term thinking. So it has put me immediately into a panic spiral. You know, they've completely fumbled the ball on our ferries. An absolutely vital piece of national infrastructure. And they've fumbled it because the decisions were made under the Labour government, so therefore immediately bad. We won't look into it. You know, I noticed that news went along with that Bluebridge, the only other ferry that we have, has just been sold to an American company. So that's good. You know, a core piece of asset, not in our control. That's fine. I'm sure nothing bad will come of it. But yes, we will see this. We have assets that people can make money off. Education, infrastructure, medical. You know, all things that are ripe for the picking if they just run them down enough, if they destroy people's trust in them. And when they do that, they're going to destroy the trust that people have that work for them, the teachers, the medical staff, all of that sort of thing. I don't even need a crystal ball for this. I need to look behind us, because this is the National Party of the 1990s, the asset strippers. The mean-spirited, like, if you don't have a good enough job, then you're scum. If you don't have a job at all, you're fucking scum. You know, it is meanness, and the mask is just starting to slip, and we're not even out of 100 days yet.
Yeah.
Like this, in my heart of hearts, when I was talking about what a national government would be if they won, when I was talking about it last year, I did not think it would be so bad so quick. I was expecting like a basic level of competency, a lack of hypocrisy.
Yep.
A basic level of competence, and it's not there.